Hello and welcome to this CBT Nuggets training course on SharePoint 2013 Core Solutions. The name of this nugget is Course Introduction. My name is Tim Warner, and I'm happy, grateful, and excited to be your instructor. Whenever I design a training course for CBT Nuggets, I always like to create an introductory nugget where we set the stage for learning. To that end, let's go over our goals for this beginning nugget. First, what exactly is Microsoft SharePoint? Those words can strike fear into the hearts of even experienced IT administrators because it's quite a big beast indeed. So we're going to get our sea legs with SharePoint by understanding its general ground level definition, both from the perspective of IT as well as from the perspective of the business manager or information worker. I also want to make sure you're fully apprised as to how the 70-331 SharePoint Core Solutions exam works, because it's a bit different, actually a lot different, from previous SharePoint Microsoft certification exams. We're going to frame the 70-331 test first in its place in the overall SharePoint certification track, and then second, I'm going to provide you with exam-specific tips and tricks. We'll conclude this nugget with a consideration of best practice advice I have for you on how to use this CBT Nuggets training course to maximum effect with minimum time investment. Let's begin. The concepts of this certification track deal with SharePoint Server, and we're not going to get anywhere unless we understand what SharePoint is. Now, we'll get into this in a little bit, but I have to make some assumptions as to your background, because the bottom line is the 70-331 test is not a beginner level test. It's actually one of the more difficult Microsoft certification exams that I've dealt with over the past several years. More on that in a little bit. For now, the purpose of this whiteboard slide is just to ensure that we're all on the same conceptual page. SharePoint Server, as I said a moment ago, can be defined differently depending upon your place in an organization. We have business leaders, managers, information workers who do their deal, whatever that may be, within their company, and may become aware of SharePoint only from a word-of-mouth perspective, or perhaps by a mandate coming from above organizationally in the organizational chart, or it may just be taken for granted by employees as the way they do business on a daily basis. On the other hand, there are those who are behind the so-called curtain, IT professionals. These are systems administrators, network administrators, help desk personnel who have the great fortune, tongue-in-cheek there, of implementing, maintaining, troubleshooting, and optimizing SharePoint Server, and of course all of the training and support that goes into with the people who are actually using the portal from the other side of the fence. First, let's take a look at the information workers' take on SharePoint. What I've done here is just basically list out a bunch of common definitions. These aren't Microsoft marketing definitions. You're not going to be tested on any of this for your exam. But if you were to ask somebody who uses SharePoint as an end user what it is, they will say things like it's a website factory. It's a way where you can request to have your own site, and then some magic happens and boom, you've got yourself a fully functional modern website. SharePoint is a document repository. It uses what's called enterprise content management, along with a healthy dose of compliance, along with a healthy dose of social media. Actually, that's another definition of SharePoint. It's a way to get to know your colleagues, especially for large enterprises that are geographically distributed. SharePoint can serve as an archive of records, can be a project workplace, and a place where work teams can collaborate and share information with each other, keep track of task lists, to-do items, documents, forms, workflows. You can check your Outlook email through SharePoint. You can work in Microsoft Office documents directly from a web browser. Of course, as a company buys into SharePoint more and more and transitions its resources from, say, SMB file shares into SharePoint Server, the importance of search and findability becomes forefront. And SharePoint always hallmarks itself, or should I say Microsoft hallmarks SharePoint, as a solution not only for finding data or information, but also learning about people. Again, that tie in to the so-called Web 2.0 social media idea. where we can do a search based on skills, for instance. I may need help on recording a Camtasia screencast. There's no one in my immediate work group who knows anything about this. Why don't I do a search in our SharePoint intranet site worldwide across all of our employee base to look for people who claim Camtasia in their skill set? You see? That's a good example of using SharePoint for people search. As I said, many end users don't even know what SharePoint is. They just know that they go to their quote intranet or their company internal website to get to their documents, to collaborate with their colleagues, to push workflows through, etc. They neither know nor care any of the moving parts under the hood. Some people use SharePoint not only for an internal private corporate website or website portal, but also you can use SharePoint as a public web presence because we have the ability to stage and publish web pages. This facilitates things like press releases. Certainly there's a blogging platform that's been part of SharePoint for a while. You have wiki pages. It's a robust product for sure. Now let's cross over to the other side of the fence. Where we're concerned for this training series is not the end user consideration, but what happens behind the proverbial curtain. Those of us who are IT pros, those of us who are developers, look at SharePoint Server 2013 as an ASP.NET 4.0 web application. It's actually a technology stack. Those of you who do open source web development have doubtless heard of the LAMP stack, where we have Linux as the underlying operating system, Apache as our web server, MySQL as our relational database, and PHP for our web development programming language. In SharePoint terminology, we have the same idea of the multi-level integrated technology stack. Here we have Windows Server as the operating system, Internet Information Services as the web server, SQL Server is the back-end database, and then we have SharePoint itself taking the place of the business logic piece. And instead of PHP, we have ASP.NET and the .NET framework for our programmatic extension to SharePoint. Yes, it's a robust product. Yes, it's called an N-tier architecture because it's so multi-layered. What makes this even cooler and also more complicated is Microsoft's focus on SharePoint in the cloud. We have SharePoint Online, that's part of Office 365. That's a feature-limited version of SharePoint. We also have Windows Azure, which is similar to Amazon Web Services. It's an infrastructure as a service platform where you can deploy your SharePoint servers as virtual machines hosted by Microsoft. I put this last bullet point here as, again, a tongue-in-cheek because with all of these moving parts, it requires a very, very skilled individual, actually a team of people, to manage SharePoint effectively. And this is just the core installation. If we're talking about integrating SharePoint with other Microsoft servers, think of Exchange Server for messaging. Think of Link Server for voice over IP, telephony, presence, chat, etc. Think of Forefront for SharePoint if we're dealing with anti-malware integration. Think of Office Web Apps if we want to run Office applications in our private SharePoint cloud from a web browser. And that's just to get us started. The good news is, in order to pass your 331 exam, you have to know a little about a lot. I like to draw it as a shallow pool, where you have to be at least cognizant or generally aware of almost every feature in the product, but you don't need to know any one feature too deeply. There's just no way you could cover that, even with a series of certification exams. Let's discuss how SharePoint 2013 certification works, because a good portion of you, my students, are interested in certifying in SharePoint 2013, and Microsoft has shifted the sands over the last several years with their certification programs. As of right now, in summer 2013, dealing with SharePoint 2013, Microsoft has 2 tracks for SharePoint, an expert level track and a master level track. The expert is the rough equivalent of what you'd find, say, in the Cisco world with the CCNP, the Network Professional. It's not an entry-level credential. It's a mid-tier or high-tier credential, and we have a separate title for IT professionals, that's us, and another one for developers. That's another whole aspect. How do we manage SharePoint and extend SharePoint from a .NET development standpoint? Remember, I will say that and repeat it. We're dealing in this exam with only the IT pro side of the fence. The master level credential is analogous to, say, in the Cisco world, the Cisco Certified Internetwork Expert or CCIE. There's a lot that goes into that title. It's very expensive and time intensive to do, and not only that, in order to become a Microsoft Master in SharePoint, you need to have both the IT Pro and the developer skill sets. I'm going to take you out onto the web in just a moment so you can see the requirements. I'm just simply summarizing them for you here. Those of you who have the Microsoft Certified IT Professional, MCITP, and SharePoint Server 2010 doubtless wonder, what do I need to do to upgrade to the expert title, which interestingly enough is called MCSE. Microsoft has recently reinvigorated, rebooted the MCSE. Those of you who are Windows administrators remember the original Microsoft Certified Systems Engineer that was the top tier IT Pro title for Windows Server. Well, Microsoft has brought back that title in a variety of contexts. Now it's Microsoft Certified Solutions Expert, and you can earn an MCSE in a number of technologies, not the least of which is SharePoint Server 2013. So the upshot for upgrade is that you need to do 3 tests. Now this is a bit of a smoke and mirrors situation because 70-417 is actually 3 tests in 1. It's a composite upgrade exam. It's kind of a beast actually, but the requirement that is meant to force you to demonstrate to Microsoft that you understand Windows Server 2012 administration. And that makes sense to a good degree because SharePoint is so inextricably interwound with Windows Server. You also need to pass 2 SharePoint Server 2013 tests. The one we're dealing with here is core configuration. There's also an accompanying bookend, if you like, 7332. That's called Advanced SharePoint Server 2013 Solutions. Now you want to keep some sites bookmarked, like the MS Learning website and the Born to Learn blog. That's the Microsoft Learning's blog site. Those are excellent places to go. Let me take you online and show you where this stuff is. First, at the Microsoft Learning site, I'm at the SharePoint Certifications page where you can read all about the MCSE in SharePoint. That's what we're concerned with. There's also the developer track, the Microsoft Certified Solutions Developer, and information on the master level. Let's go right into the MCSE and we can see where our exam fits in. In order to be an MCSE in SharePoint, you need to pass 3 Windows Server 2012 exams, 410, 411, and 412. We have you covered here with CBT Nuggets. We've got training for all 3 of these titles. And then exams 4 and 5 are the previously mentioned 331 and 332 SharePoint tests. Down below you have a repeat of what I've already showed you regarding upgrade to the MCSE from a SharePoint 2010 context. As far as exam metadata, the 331 exam costs $150 USD to register. You'll want to go to prometric.com/Microsoft. Here you can find a local testing center and get registered. I want to draw your attention to this discounts and special offers link because you'll want to take advantage of these. They will save you money. The 2 offers that you want to look for are the second shot offers and the exam package offers. Second shot is not offered all the time. That's why I'm not seeing it on the page here. It's kind of a bummer because there are some exams that I need to take myself. Second shot basically allows you to get an extra voucher, an extra exam voucher when you make your purchase. And then if you do not pass the test on your first try, you can redeem the second shot voucher. So it effectively lowers your registration price to $75 if you need to take the test a second time. It's a nice way to look at it as insurance. The exam packages are discounts depending upon what your track is. You can get a significant discount on your exam registrations. As a matter of fact, look here, MCSE SharePoint. We can get a 15% reduction and get vouchers for all of our exams that we need, buy them all at once. In other words, the Windows Server 2012 tests that we need, as well as the MCSE SharePoint tests. This is a good deal. Let's see if there's anything I've missed regarding the 7331 exam. Yeah, there's some metadata here, and this is really important information, friends, so listen up. The passing score for this computer-based test is the same as any other Microsoft test, and you have approximately 30 traditional questions. By traditional, I mean single answer multiple choice, multiple answer multiple choice, and interactive items. Also, the rest of the questions, approximately 40 additional questions, are based on case studies. Yes, you heard me correctly, friends. Case studies are where you get a fairly significant amount of reading. It's a fictional company, and you'll see a description of their environment, their physical and logical IT environment. Then you'll see some business requirements that they have for SharePoint. And then there'll be some technical requirements. So you have basically 3 sections. 1 is just background metadata. 2, the soft skills or the soft business related goals that the company has. And then the technical goals that they have IT-wise. What you'll have is, after a case study, you'll have between, say, 8 and 12 questions that deal with various aspects of that case. It's almost as if you've been called in as a consultant by this company, and you're going to give them advice. And on its face, that's a good way to test your knowledge of SharePoint. However, people with less than, say, 4 years of experience with SharePoint will find themselves in some very deep water. I think that's why Microsoft, on their exam page, actually says that you should have 4 or more years of prior experience with SharePoint. I have to warn you, friends, the 7331 test is very difficult. As a matter of fact, let's quickly pop open the Microsoft Learning page for exam 7331, and let's look at the audience profile. Sure enough, they expect that candidates have more than 4 years of experience planning and maintaining SharePoint. So that means not just simply implementing SharePoint, actually working with an already rolled out farm, but you understand what goes into architecting or planning and designing a farm. I know that this probably scares some of you, and I understand that, but I want you to be fully cognizant of what you're getting into, and I will keep all of you in mind no matter what your past experience with SharePoint. I'll keep you in the forefront of my mind as we work through this training together. So those are the case studies. The interactive items are things like hotspots, where you'll see a user interface element and you're asked to literally click the mouse in the appropriate option. You'll see processes, where you need to take some from the list and put them in the proper order. That tests your ability to visualize a process with SharePoint 2013 and makes sure that you know how to perform the steps, basically. And drag and drop is the same idea. So instead of simply answering a multiple choice A, B, C, D, you're using the mouse and interacting with the test in a more intimate way. Just by way of trivia, Microsoft hired an instructional design company called Grandmasters to write these tests, and I think it shows. For many years, Microsoft was giving their exams as just very straightforward multiple choice experiences, similar to what you'd find in the CompTIA exams. Then they meaning Microsoft, hires this hotshot company, and they want to prove what they know with regard to test-taking methodology. They've created an exam that's very, very difficult. I sometimes wonder if it's too difficult for the level, but, you know, the bottom line, friends, is that Microsoft never asked me my opinion about this. We'd have a different exam, maybe, if they had. So with regard to specific tips and tricks for the exam, look at the case studies as shared item stems. An item stem is the part of the question before they actually ask you the question. And just read through the case from a high level. Don't get bogged down thinking you have to memorize the whole thing. Go at it looking at the big picture just to figure out what's what. Okay, here they're talking about Exchange being important to them. Over here they're talking about link. Just pick up on keywords, because then when you're answering the questions, you'll know, oh, okay, this question is asking from this point of the case study. This other question deals with the other part of the case study. Each question is just going to pick a piece from the case study. Now, it's important that you think like a marketing person, a Microsoft marketing person. You have to understand here that there's the Microsoft answer and then there's your real world answer. Sometimes you might want to read into the case. Well, in my experience with SharePoint, this is what happens. Unfortunately, for these certification tests, you have to, in a sense, forget your real world experience and stick only, and I mean only, friends, with the text that's given in the case. If the case doesn't mention link, link doesn't exist. If the case puts heavy emphasis on Exchange Server, then you know you need to test on Exchange Server, but only the parameters that are mentioned explicitly in the case. I like to imagine when I'm doing a case study question that I'm a consultant sitting down with the stakeholders. I literally think of what their face looks like and what their concerns are as they tell me. Of course, all their concerns are coming through the text of the case study, but it helps me think more truly about the situation. Again, always keeping in mind that as far as Microsoft is concerned, their technologies are the only ones that exist on the planet, and their technologies work only as described on the TechNet website. And those of you with experience know that I'm totally being tongue-in-cheek, but I'm also speaking the truth. Sweeping up the shavings and finishing out this introductory nugget, best practices for using this course. I would suggest that you watch every nugget because there's always something that anybody can pick up no matter what your experience with SharePoint is. I would say that you absolutely have to have hands-on experience with SharePoint before you sit for the test. I wouldn't suggest you play around at work in your production environment. Instead, set up a virtual machine-based test lab. We're developing virtual labs at CBT Nuggets, and in particular, I'm building at least 2, if not more, for this course. So check on the CBT Nuggets website very regularly for announcements about these SharePoint 2013 virtual labs. Those will be crucial for you to work along with me as I do my demos. In addition to the practical experience in the theory, you have to learn how to take Microsoft exams. So to that end, CBT Nuggets offers our site subscribers access to Transcender and self-test software, practice tests. You need to drill on those until you're consistently getting 90% or higher. Finally, if you need filling out, I'm going to give you lots of supplemental websites throughout this training course. They use a cbt.gg. It's a URL shortening service through Bitly. So the URLs are case sensitive. So if you see something like this, that's going to be lowercase s, uppercase I, uppercase t, lowercase 2, or actually 2. I don't think there is an uppercase, lowercase 2. Anyway, those shorty URLs are case sensitive. Unfortunately, they're not clickable, but I hope they'll be easy enough to transcribe. If you want to get a book to fill out your theory, I do suggest the Microsoft Press Exam Ref series. There's a title specifically for the 331 exam that I've read. It's pretty good. And there you have it. So what did we learn in this course introduction nugget? We reviewed what Microsoft SharePoint is from a high level and from a couple different stakeholders' positions. I hope you now have a very clear picture of what to expect on your 7331 exam. I taught you how much it costs, where you go to register, where the exam fits in with the larger certification track for SharePoint Server 2013, and I gave you exam tips, tricks, and metadata. Don't be too scared off by the case study business, friends. Taking those Transcender or self-test practice tests that use case studies will prove invaluable to get you into the groove of that kind of close analysis. I also gave you some techniques on how to use this course to get the most out of it with minimal time. I will say that I've done quite a bit of other courses for CBT Nuggets on SharePoint, actually a couple versions, SharePoint 2010 and SharePoint 2007. Therefore, I would suggest that you could get some mileage out of looking at my other SharePoint courses, perhaps to broaden or deepen concepts or fill in blanks. Place your thinking cap on, fasten your seatbelt, and get ready for a bumpy but ultimately enjoyable ride through the world of SharePoint Server 2013. I'm really excited about this. I hope you are as well. And with that, I hope that this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.